Hello, everyone. This is so exciting. I'm MJ Malpiedi from Game Over Books. You are here for a lovely little reading from Emily Stoddard and a gorgeous new book that just came out last week called Divination with a Human Heart Attached. I'm so freaking excited for this tonight. I've really been looking forward to this. You are in for such a treat with this reading. And I don't want to go too much with like the little spiels and shenanigans, so I'm going to keep it brief. We're going to start with, of course, what you're all here for, right? You're here for the poems. You're here for the Emily Stoddard of it all. And so I'm going to introduce Emily just very quickly, and Emily will bless us with these words, and then I'll come back on a little later and we'll do a little Q&A with the author. I have some questions that I've written up, but I would love to hear from the audience, to have some stuff come up into the chat in between, y'all praising Emily for this phenomenal book. So we're gonna have a great time. And with that, Emily, how you feeling?
Good. I'm seeing so many familiar faces. Thank you,
I
everyone.
know, this is great. This is
for
a
being here.
wonderful audience. I'm going to bring you up here right now. And please, of course, give all the love in the world to Emily in the chat while we are going throughout the reading tonight and the Q&A, because she very well deserves it. And with that being said, let's do it, shall we? Okay. Emily Stoddard, she, her, is a poet and creative nonfiction writer in Michigan. Divination with the Human Heart Attached is her debut poetry collection. The book was a finalist for the Orson Poetry Prize, Wren Poetry Prize, and Barry Spacks Poetry Prize. No big deal. Emily's writing can also be found in Tupelo Quarterly, Baltimore Review, Ruminate, Radar, Tinderbox Poetry Journal, Whitefish Review, and elsewhere. In 2021, she received the Developmental Editing Fellowship in Creative Nonfiction from the Kenyon Review. Emily leads workshops as an affiliate of the Amherst Writers and Artists Method. More at emilystoddard.com. Please, Emily, take it away.
All right. Thank you, MJ. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is just such a thrill after being in the wilderness with a book for as long as many of us. I know there's a lot of fellow writers here and folks who I've written with at workshops and through Amherst Writers. So you all know what it takes to get to a night like this, and it means a lot to celebrate with you all. So thank you so much. I thought I would start with the title poem, Divination with a Human Heart Attached. You know the story. The son returns, and now a feast. The brother reanimates, whole again. The daughter resurfaces, and with her flowers. All retrieved from a supernatural place, but not for any supernatural reason. Only because someone needed them, and grief is too much. Miracles that are more human upon inspection. You know the story. The children are restless in the garden, but not for want of food or love. Only because no animal can perfectly avoid itself. Even ants will begin to groom themselves if given a mirror. They follow their own scent to find the way home again, but not like the robin this morning, colliding with the window, tempted by a misplaced reflection. Upon watching her collapse in the dirt, the first instinct was a tenderness. Would she fly again? But the answer was hungry and familiar. With these wings, what omen? So I think I'm gonna move next. I think I might share one of the Petronilla poems. So Petronilla is one of the figures that shows up in the book, and there's some persona poetry around her, and she's kind of the apocryphal daughter of Saint Peter, and there's some stories around her and sort of what happened with them, and I'll share the one. There's a few poems where she tries to imagine her father's prayer for her. So Saint Peter, there's this story that he prayed for her to be paralyzed. I'll share the epigraph that kind of sets it up. It's a passage from the Acts of Philip that says, Peter, the leader, thus fled from every place where there was a woman. Moreover, he was scandalized due to his daughter, who was very beautiful. Therefore, he prayed to the Lord, and she became paralyzed on one side, so that she might not be beguiled. And it's an interesting note. There's a note about the research behind some of this in the back, but paralysis at that time, Dr. Megan Henning out of the University of Dayton has done some really cool work around this to show that paralysis was actually associated with infertility at that time. So that's the nature of the kind of prayer we're talking here, that there's no lineage left for Petronilla after this, which I find really fascinating as a poet working with these things. So this is the first of a few poems where she tries to imagine that prayer, her father's prayer. Which part of my body most worried him? Was it the eyes, my shoulders, the cap of my elbow? What is it like to see my body as he once saw it, beautiful and charged, able to swing the gaze of a man and make him forget the sea, make him forget his fishing nets, make him leave everything and follow? Has there ever been a body like that that hasn't been dangerous? I'm going to share one more from Petronilla. Um, and that I think, well, in the questions, I know MJ had some questions around her, so we can talk about her a bit more. But this is one, it's basically the passion according to Petronilla when she imagines, she's kind of this extra witness, this hidden witness in these early texts around a particular tradition. So this is another poem deeper in the book called Wait for It. My father falls asleep in the garden. This is how I learned God has a sense of humor. My father falls asleep in the garden, and he does remember the buttercups, but he does not remember the arrival of soldiers or the locusts taking leave of their chafing just before. This is how I know God is waiting for us to hear the punchline, the dry and comfortless laugh reserved for the man late to his own story. So humored God is, he gives my father 3 more chances to let the ending go otherwise. After that evening, the dreams come. A woman carrying 153 fish who tells me, "Don't be afraid." Every morning after, I clean my father's net, let the linen slip between my hands and spread it out to dry. In the evening, I refasten each of the stones and test the weight of what's to come. When my father finds me bent to the work, I want to say, "Don't be afraid." But he is not ready yet. Those with ears, let them hear. My father is prone to striking off what he doesn't understand. The ear of the boy in the garden is an impulse I know well. So I am surprised when he comes to me and says he will let me join them on the boat. I don't know what he dreams, but that morning on the water, I am ready for the words that come. "Friends, haven't you caught any fish?" My father tries to hear the man on the shore, but it's just as well he doesn't catch the joke, as the slap of fish fills the ear. We eat well that night. My mother lights every candle. We let every spot at the table be filled with a guest. It's long after evening when I hear the footsteps of soldiers. Now they have come to collect my father. He is telling a story and goes dead silent. Tomorrow, I will clean the net again, refasten the stones. But tonight, my mother laughs. She kisses his ear. She says, "Don't be afraid." I think maybe a nice one to move on from that one, kind of a companion to it that is, that was in Petronilla's voice. I think that's one of the was one of the challenges with this kind of collection, is figuring out what was in Petronilla's voice, what was in my own speaking voice, what was from my experience, what was kind of working with the history there, and the myths around these things. And so this one is closer to my own experience, and definitely for my family that I have listening in tonight. This is Passion Play. In the sacristy, I consider striking distance and the angles of whips. How close would a Roman soldier need to be to solicit a gash? How close to create a hairline of red? Would the whip roll across the skin in one clear lick, or would it hiccup across the folds? Did the son of the father have folds of skin, or was he polished tight by hard work like my father? How different are the muscles of a carpenter from the muscles of a forester? I decide on wide slashes, precise but hungry, as if the soldier had wanted to peel into the heart, and apply the blood, a mix of caro syrup and red dye. Like Jesus in Gethsemane, my father did not want to be Jesus. He said he wanted to be Peter. The parish priest knew better. My father has never not wanted to be the hero. So every year he carries a cross to the church, trailed by the screams of parishioners. Crucify him, crucify him. He wears a crown of thorns he made from a wild honey locust, and better than ash, it leaves a bloody mark on his forehead. We raise his body up on the cross he built himself from a redwood tree. My mother makes the same joke about trying to live with him when he thinks he's God. And we practice his lines so much, they become a new kind of family prayer. I say, Father, if it is your will. My brothers cry back, take this cup from me. I say, the reason I was born, the reason I came into this world, and my brothers call, is to testify to the truth. My father is known for his wail, my God, why have you forsaken me? But I covet the lines where Jesus sounds lonely and surprised by it. Peter, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour with me? As lonely as anyone who has ever tried to be human. Every year, I find a little more of the broken alien inside of him. My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my subjects would be fighting to save me from being handed over. As it is, my kingdom is not from here. Every year, I want more passion, less resurrection. Every year, the slashes get wider. I think I might, for the next one, let's see. Sorry, I'm changing it up on the fly. So I think I'm going to share one just called Descendants, just to give a sense, and then maybe MJ, I'll check in with you around if we want to move to questions. That this was one of the earlier poems I wrote before I was working with some of the other material in the book. And it was related to some of the ancestral work that I've done around sort of some ancestors who were in positions of power with religion and used that in for better or worse, and sort of how do we reconcile with that. And so this poem kind of came out of that space and was one of the early ones that kind of told me I'm working on a theme here that's bigger than what maybe I thought. So it's called Descendants. Restless for the language an ancestor spoke into the sky of their God, we sift remnants of tongues, break the breath. We count in generations, and this is false math. The ladder of my spine is lined by shores that were not ours to fish, by altars where we bowed and altars we burned, by prayers kept and killed. And we are not done yet, inventing names for what will save us. Even now, some speak of doves and some speak of towers. So I had a couple more in mind to read, but I thought I would do a check with MJ just to see, because I also see there's some folks popping in on chat. What do you think, MJ? Should I read a couple more?
Oh, please, please.
Okay, okay.
You're doing great on time.
Okay, all right.
No, you're fantastic.
Okay. I'm excited. Can you tell I'm excited to chat with everyone, get to questions? Yeah. Then I think what I'll do next is I might go to, I think I'll move to I might have been a botanist. I might have been a botanist. If they had let me stay inside the elementary school biology class, if I had not been sent to the chapel to kneel when my parents worried I was not ready for the reproductive habits of flora and fauna. As it is, exile did what it does, made the forbidden more ripe, and so I became a poet instead. When I finally got to see the parts, it was everything my parents feared. I was seduced. More, I said. Tell me your name, I said. Without the restraint of a scientist, the garden was left to green harder and harder, formed lush and private in my mind where there is never any drought. The penchant trees, their xylem and phloem, one path to carry water, another to descend with sugar for the root. Black walnut's soapy smell and its many-chambered pith, which is enough to know it is not the tree of heaven. Flora climbs my throat. No wonder I wake up with new roots, datura, acer negundo, in my mouth. Oh, purple stalk, my teacher now. Yesterday you were a sign of life, but today, so I've learned, you are loose strife. And I am ripping you out before you choke bee balm, ironweed, bone set. Oh, anther, oh, stigma, oh, filament. Don't be mistaken. I was loved so carefully, so tediously, like a daughter. They only forgot to ask what I am a daughter of. Well, I think I might move to, I think I'm gonna do this one for Carl, who's it's kind of like nice to have a reading now where I can actually say this one is for this person. This was so I'm going to do one of the marriage poems that's in the book for Carl, who's listening and keeping our pale Finny quiet. Those of you who have written with me know my dog Finny. He's my sidekick, but he's not a good sidekick for a poetry reading. So Carl is with him right now. This is a later marriage poem, and it echoes a line from an earlier marriage poem to sing over and over the same thing as the new thing. In the woods this morning, there is no argument. Last night is a tombstone. Today is a bouquet of flowers. We walk in silence among bracken fern between white oak. He is wearing his plaid flannel shirt, the only one he owns, meant for occasions like this. I am wishing I had brought my scarf. We are on the edge of fall when leaves decide to let go or a cold wind decides for them. Sometimes our silence is an old comfort, easy and familiar as propping my feet next to the fire. Sometimes our silence is a pulse, a tenuous alarm that strings us together. These times remind me that we are separate people. Maybe that's why they happen at all, to call me into my skin, to mark the division in our fingers. Sometimes I look at him and remember he has brown eyes. How easily I forget. The color stops mattering at a certain point. It's the shadows that count. The way, without effort, a pupil flares under the weight of recognition. And I think I'll read one more, and it's the last poem. It's kind of, it's funny because this poem sometimes was the first poem in the draft, and then eventually it wanted to be the last poem. And I'm glad it landed there because it feels a little bit like a send off, a closure. So I'll read it with that intent for the kind of reading portion here. And it's here, amen is not amen. Home is wherever we hold our breath the least. The white oak does not remember it differently, and her memory is the only God I understand. Here, amen is not amen, but the exhale through the center of moon. Say you know this too, and we can be homesick together. Trade our histories like the trees do, starting at the roots. These secret understories we keep, vast as oceans, but bordered by skin. Let us defy it all, and finding each other, become a revolution. After all, the only real love is the kind that witnesses. The way a full moon shreds the forest open without crushing the ferns, a light that breathes and breathes. Thanks, everyone.
Wow. Emily Stoddard, everybody. Can we get I know y'all can't Do
I
it
see
quite
that.
on the
Thank you,
Zoom,
everyone.
but we can give it up. You can come on your video. You can give the little icons and reactions. There we go. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Yes, it was a beautiful reading, very much so. And we can definitely tell you're excited to get into some conversation. I'm sure you're going to be reading from this a lot, so I think it's nice to have like
Yeah,
a little bit of that pressure off, right?
yeah.
But yeah, that being said, I do have some stuff that I've come up with to talk about for tonight, but also if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask in terms of the book, the reading, Emily herself, just please throw them in the chat. I like to get to them if I can. But with that, I want to actually, can you hold up the book, the front, the
Oh
cover
yeah,
for
yeah,
me?
yeah.
So yeah, I want to talk about this a little bit, this incredible eye-catching cover
Yes.
that we've got going on here. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the cover design process for you. And if you
Mhm.
could tell us, is that your actual eye? I know some
Yeah.
people know the answer to this question, but is that your actual eye that we get to see on the front cover there?
That is the most popular question. And I have family members and a very dear friend who's very upset that it's not my eye. So I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. I even reached out to, so Albin Fisher designed the cover and he was like my dream cover artist. I just really admire his work. He happens to be a fellow Grand Rapids person, so we're from the same place. I think we
Awesome.
even both worked for the local paper around the same time. So like just these weird, like the literary community is so weird how you see each other out there and then you find out you have other connections, So it was just a real gift to be able to work with him. I actually emailed him today. I said, just to be sure, where did the eye come from? And he was like, it's a stock photo. There's no fantastic story, So
We made that
I'm
stock photo
very,
look
yeah,
great.
yeah. I mean, it really is so striking. It was very like from the three options that were all wonderful, but this one was the clear like, yes, this is meant to be the book cover, which is just like a very, for me, the book cover felt like the reward at the end of the process, especially doing it with Game
Yeah.
Over, because you all are so, I've heard some stories of folks who don't get to have much say in their covers, and you all are so collaborative and like have been so supportive. So it just made it like this beautiful gift to like get to dress up the book after doing all the writing. And I will say I haven't really told any other folks this, so this is just for us tonight, but it kind of made me laugh too, because my family knows I have doodled eyes my entire life. That's all I doodle is a single eye. My mom keeps these sheets of paper where she'll say, I found more of your eyes. And it'll be like this page full of eye doodles from high school. So when Albin came back, not knowing that, came back with this concept, I was like, this was just meant to be. I've been doodling my way to this cover
Yeah, this
forever,
is you
So
already had it in mind,
yeah,
right?
so my family was not surprised at all in a way when they saw it, because like, of course, it's a single eye. Yeah, so I'm just really, really grateful for the whole process and for it just sort of, I couldn't imagine the cover as I was writing the book. So to end up with one that's like, oh, there you are. Yes, that's what it was supposed to be. That was a real gift.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say that's the beauty of the collaboration, right? Like that's why
Yeah,
there definitely should be more of it. Because at the end of the day, it's your baby, right? Like
yeah,
you
yeah.
know how this is gonna come together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's beautiful. I love that. And I love that family connection too with the doodles. I think that's incredible. So yeah, let's actually, you did go through the Petronilla poems, and I do have a question about that, in particular, because that is an image that comes, that person, that character comes in through a lot. So why did you choose Petronella, and particularly the magpie as well, as focal points for many of these poems? So what was it that drew you to these particular characters?
So that it was interesting because I didn't really choose them. They just started showing up. Like image work and dream work is a really important part of my creative practice. And so Petronilla specifically, like there were just dreams happening around my childhood church and some things that happened and stuff that I did not want to write about. This is the thing I've been just telling everyone. Some of you are probably sick of me saying this. Like, I didn't want to write this book. When it kept coming up in dreams and other imagery, like I had a dream where a woman gave me a set of keys and was outside our childhood church, and I had no idea who she was. They were marked 531. And she was so persistent that at a certain point, I'm kind of like the person who's like, you can't say no to your instincts at a certain point, even if
Right.
you don't know where it's going, you have to at least get it out. So I started saying, fine, I'll write it down as raw material. But you're not going to be a book because I'm not writing that book, you know? And then I kind of negotiated and said, well, you can be my second book. And no, it ended up being the first one. So, and then through that process, ended up finding out, you know, uh, it was St. Peter's daughter, that obviously that's an association with keys, with like keys to the church sort of thing. And wildly enough, those numbers 531, normally when I have that stuff happening, I'm a big numerology kind of geek about that stuff. I'm always looking up what things mean and why. But I hadn't for some reason with that. And I looked it up, and her feast day is May 31st, which is 531.
Yeah.
So there's just some sort of like synchronicity happening with all of that, where I was very resistant. It kept showing up. And then through the process of just working with that and letting it come out as raw material and then see what happens, it found its way. The magpie is really interesting too, because we don't even have magpies in Michigan. You know, I'm born and raised
Right.
in Michigan. I'm still in Michigan now. I've been in San Francisco, was there for a couple of years, but magpie shouldn't be a bird that kind of comes up, but it did. And there's a lot of interesting folklore around the magpie, with everything you see in the book around it refused shelter in the ark. They say that Satan left a drop of blood under the magpie's tongue, and that's why the magpie is an evil bird. That's all folklore from different areas and cultures around the world. And as I was resisting the book, I had a couple instances, like one where I went to New Mexico to work on what I thought was going to be the first book. And there was all this clattering on the roof of my room. I was like, what is that? And I opened the window, and it was full of magpies. The field was just full of magpies, which shows up in the first
Yeah.
poem too, the idea of magpied fields. I just woke up with that phrase one day, and months and months later, it ended up happening in New Mexico, where there were just magpied fields everywhere. So just, I almost hesitate. People sort of say like, whoa, that's something, you know, like people sometimes say prophetic or revelatory. And I do believe in those things. But I also think if there's any kind of spirit, collaborator, muse, whatever out there, it knows I'm really stubborn, and it just finds other ways. Like, I think it has a
Sure.
dark sense of humor with me, where it's like, oh, you're not going to listen. Oh, I'll send some magpies. You're going to pay attention. And, you know,
Yeah.
so to me,
No,
it's more
honestly,
like that. Yeah.
it's as you were saying that, what I actually immediately came to mind was like authors like Sela Satterstrom, right? Or like
Mm-hmm.
C.A. Conrad, where they're like
Mm-hmm.
divinatory poetics,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, when you're doing that dream work, it takes you some wild places. And like you were saying, I love how
Yeah.
you used the word resisted, and
Yeah.
how in the end it was like, no, 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 no. Like, we're
Yeah.
giving you a message here, and you gotta
It's
we're taking you places. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. People keep asking, like in interviews, it comes up the word acceptance a lot. Like, so where are you at with acceptance on this stuff now, having written? It's like, I don't know that I've yet accepted it. I
sure.
just, I think I'm more like, okay, I'm gonna do the work. I at least want to be able to say I listened well, and let things come through. And that's kind of like the best, you can do at a certain point when you're, because I'm also really skeptical about where in that sort of divinatory poetics, like where does the ego show up to try and force your hand? And I had to navigate that a lot while writing the book. Is like, okay, when am I trying to author something versus just sort of receiving what's happening? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, while actually we're on the topic of,
Hmm.
sort of these divinatory practices and
Hmm.
leading us where they might, I am curious. So it's broken into three different arcs, the entire collection,
Hmm.
right? And so I'm curious how or what methods you used to decide upon how they were going to be organized, and yeah, like where did you figure out what a particular poem was going to go,
Hmm.
how it
Yeah.
fit for you? What was the puzzle like?
That is like the classic question for every poet should be like answer for this, because we're all trying to figure it out. Like, tell me how you did it. Because um, yeah, and I'm a neurodivergent poet who's very nonlinear. So arc and finding the through line and like putting things in order, that like order and form come last for me in the creative process. So it takes me a long time to get there. I have to work with the material first, and I'm very, very much led by image more than anything else. Even line breaks in terms of form are very difficult for me because it's like I want the image to just lead me where it's going, and I'm very seduced by that, you know. But at the point that we talk about what order it's supposed to go in and how things break, it kind of gets tricky for me. So one thing that did happen in the process was I had this image. I was struggling with the order a lot and the arcs and the sections and stuff one day. And I kind of got this image of an art gallery, and I started
Mhm.
seeing like the magpie was here at the entrance, and then this was over here. And something about that became like an exercise of seeing the book in space. And that's where I kind of figured out like, oh, what if the magpie is supposed to be like leading into each section? Now that I've seen it as an art gallery and I know what I'm supposed to be looking at first, it helps me reshuffle everything else. So that was one of those gifts where like I think sometimes you're just doing the work and you have to keep doing it so that those kind of gifts can come through. I did not invent or concoct that, you know, it just landed in a moment of frustration after I'd been working with it all for a while. Um, yeah. So the other thing I do is I take a lot of notes from other forms of art. And the two that have been most important to me, like definitely as I was working on this book, are dance and comedy, actually.
Mhm.
So like choreography and gesture, and then also like a sense of timing. Like how do you call
Yeah.
back to things? How do you set up things? I'm really curious about how poetry collections can do that. How can they set something up and then pay it off or call back and have that either be like really emotional or sometimes funny? Like, is there dark humor in that? Yeah, that was
Right,
something I
right.
wondered about a lot as I worked on the flow of the book.
Yeah, or like that like Hannah Gatsby, like that rise and fall of tension,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
Like, no,
yeah,
absolutely. And I
yeah.
honestly, I always love to ask this question because like you said, people are always looking for like the way. I'm thinking the middle, or this is the way, right? In
Yeah,
terms of,
yeah.
how you're supposed to format your stuff. But there isn't any
Mhm.
true rhyme or reason. I think everyone has such
Right.
interesting methodologies around this
Mhm.
stuff and how they do it. But anyway, going off of that, and please, anyone in the audience, if you got a question, now's the time. Don't be shy.
I
There's
love
no
questions.
there's no
So
silly
yeah,
questions.
open book. So
So I am so happy that you read that particular botanist poem. I know you've been getting asked about it a little bit, but I
yeah.
would, in this particular vein, there are many images of plants and botanical language spread throughout the poems, and I'm just curious. There's been so much multiverse talk in media and content nowadays that do you believe there is a reality where you are a full-time botanist, where you did actually go down that path?
I love that possible reality. I can imagine my dad is nodding right now. So my dad's a forester. And so that's definitely, you know, some of the influence there. And there was a brief window of time when I was in a very bad space with career and sort of things. It was like, I don't know. I don't know what this all means anymore. It was when we were living in San Francisco and things were rough. And I all I could do every day was go to the botanical garden there in Golden Gate Park, and I would just bring what I called a sad burrito and sit and eat my burrito and enjoy the botanical gardens. And at that time, I actually looked into programs for going back to school to do like horticulture, botany, because I thought maybe I just need to. I think there's and maybe it's like a little bit the neurodivergent part, like you get so overstimulated by some things that you need that grounding force. And so that for me, like being outdoors, being connected to, and in a real specific way, a really particular way, like knowing the names of things. It's probably like one of my special interest sort of things where like I just love to focus on like native plants, you know, just like a personal obsession. So I could totally see a universe where yeah, I am a botanist, but I'm glad in this universe I found a way to make it like a passion that informs like what I think is my true craft in this life, of writing.
No, absolutely. Honestly, you
Yeah.
excel at both. Just like the imagery and the way you utilize that language throughout the poems is just, it's so incredible.
Oh,
It's like
thank you. Thanks.
vivid and stellar. And there are parts where I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're just a botanist, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Like I think you did both, but
Yeah.
but okay. So I'm about to get to my last question, I believe, for now. So,
Oh, and
oh
I see
yes,
2
Michaela
questions in
to
the
the
yeah.
rescue.
Thank you,
Oh
Mateo.
man, what wonderful timing. Okay, so we got a two-parter here from Michaela. Two questions. What was your relationship between research and writing? And two, you say you try to receive more than author. What do you do when you creatively stuck and not receiving anything other than eating sad burritos?
Yeah. Food always helps, right? Um, so the first question, research and writing, yeah, that one, I still have a ton of curiosity about that. And the way, and part of it comes out of my genealogy practice. Like part of me researches consciously is like, I'm interested in this person or this thing. And so I go research it. But what I learned kind of early on with my genealogy ancestral work is there's also, it's a little bit kind of like how the magpies and Petronilla worked, like doing a little bit and then waiting for it to sort of work in the background and then getting a nudge. Like, oh, I wonder why that is, or I wonder where they came from, or I wonder what church did they go to, or where was their house, or, that always leads to rabbit holes. For some reason, that like whenever those little nudges show up, I always try to honor them, which was exactly what I did with the book too. And how I stumbled into stuff about Petronilla, like Dr. Henning's work was completely just a rabbit hole find. So I had already been working with Petronilla for probably a couple years writing these poems, feeling like, am I qualified to write these poems? Should I be a theologian to write these poems? The whole self-doubt thing. And then I found her work, these papers that actually made the case for why paralysis would have meant this, what it meant that Peter had this prayer or managed her this way, and the connection to infertility, which I have infertility. So it was like, and I had never known that part of Petronilla's story. So
Wow.
the research was just like incredibly affirming, and also came at that moment where it was like, I needed this to know that I can keep doing this work, and that there's a way that a poet's going to do this work that a scholar isn't, and those two can complement each other. So so it's a little bit of like intuitive research and organic kind of research, and then but just like setting enough in motion, asking questions. There's just so much being digitized now that it's getting easier, I think, as a creative writer, to find that kind of research. I mean, even 5 years ago, so much of that was like behind paywalls and everything, but now it's available, whether it's academic or otherwise. So yeah, I would love to. I mean, that's something I think I'm still learning about, is how to do that as a writer in terms of research. But after having written this book, I think a lot of writers would probably get a lot of generative stuff out of doing more of that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And we got another audience question. This is great. Love it, guys. Keep it up. So Lynn is asking, despite what you've said about being led by the image and things related to form coming later, I'm curious about your use of the line. It seems very thoughtful and intentional, especially with long line poems with lots of enjambment. Can you talk a little bit about how you make decisions about the line, how much is actively decided, how much is intuitive, etc.?
Oh, Lynn, thank you for that. That's a question that's also a gift, because line breaks are truly what I struggle with the most. And so then when people kind of read them with awareness of what I'm attempting, um, back in college, I studied with Diane Wachowski, and she, her comment to me was that you have an elegant mind, but you can't sense the organic shape of the poem. And ever since, I've wondered, what is the organic shape of the poem? And I love that feedback, but it's literally feedback that for years I'm always asking, what is the organic shape of the poem? And have I learned how to figure that out yet? So Lynn mentions enjambment, and which for folks that are less familiar with poetry, that's like, I think a good poem example of that is it embarrasses me to see myself. It's one that has some really long running lines. And I'll hold it up so folks you can kind of see it flows and then it goes to the next page. And that one, the enjambment, that sense of like the line running onto the next line and sounds getting caught tight together there, that was intentional. I'm led more by sound than I am form, probably. I like certain sounds to pop and to run into each other if I can. So this poem probably does that, probably is the best like example of that. And it also connects to, I try if I can to connect it to an image that's at work in the poem or something specific. In this one, there's mention of a Rube Goldberg machine. So the poem just starts running and it's like one thing is setting the next in motion, which is, I think, a really fun reason to have a line that is doing that too, that is keeping the energy in motion. So as someone I really admire for their line breaks and have been trying to figure out a lot how she does it is Diane Seuss. I was reading her work as I was working on poems like this, and I there's probably some, signatures there of that I'm attempting to think about the line that way. So yeah.
No, I
And Lynn
appreciate
says, yeah, I did go to Michigan State. Lynn asked if I went to Michigan State. So, so we both studied with Diane. Okay. Lynn knows about the organic shape of the foam.
I just love that because it's just so esoteric, and at the same time, I'm like, I feel like I understand, but also like,
Yeah.
what? What are you
And
trying to say?
Diane is like so direct and so yeah, so receiving that from her, it's like after I studied with her for like 3 years. So coming from her, it had all this other weight to it that, yeah, that's why it's still probably hanging out with me. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think I guess I'll lead into my last question here, and then we'll give one last shout out to the audience to see if people got anything. But my one other question, what, and I like to ask this of most of the authors because once the book gets out into the world, people are going to take different things from it here and there, and so I'm curious, like, what do you hope readers learn or take away from the book in regards to theology, iconography, and the way humans choose to utilize religious or mythological stories,
Hmm.
right? And other things
Yeah.
as well. What anything that you
Yeah.
hope readers take.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always like, just by nature of if you read the book, I'm probably cautious to be like, and here's what you should, learn from it. So there's that like happening of I don't want to say what the conclusion should be, but at the same time, I do think one of the things that I took away from the process, as I struggled with the tension around like who should tell these stories or why have only certain people told these stories or what does it mean that some people aren't represented in these stories and how do we reconcile with that, how do we navigate that. Something I came back to a lot was Thomas Merton's Message to Poets, and
Mm,
in that it's this really wonderful energetic message to poets, and he says, let us be proud that we are not experts in anything. And I held so close to that as I worked on the book, and just to the idea that there's a reason that poets are poets and scholars are scholars and theologians are theologians, and we shouldn't let those identities or roles like keep us from asking these questions, that there's always more waiting at the edges and some people are better equipped with imagination or otherwise to go ask those questions. And then I think the only other thing I would say is uh, my personal belief is if your reverence doesn't have room for irreverence, then maybe it's not big enough yet. you know, I
I
think
love
irreverence was something that really taught me a lot about these poems and what I was trying to either listen for in them or sort of where they went. And I I really appreciate when folks like some of the irreverence in it. And I hope, yeah, maybe it's a book that makes more space for us to, you know, be irreverent with these things that are often thought of as very serious tradition. But there's a lot
yeah.
to reconsider and I think laugh at. Like one of the things I learned, sorry, I'll just one.
No,
Apparently
go for
Jesus
it.
doesn't laugh anywhere in the canonical gospels, which to me is
Oh,
ridiculous.
that
Like,
is really weird.
yeah, like the full humanness of experience, I think should include definitely a ton of irreverence. So that's where there's a epigraph from Judas, the book Gospel of Judas, or around Jesus coming in and laughing at them, like praying over bread. Like, what are you doing? Which I think is great that there's these other kind of texts that offer these other ways of thinking about it. And I think it's telling that those other texts include more room for laughter and those other aspects, So yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
That was my last. Oh, Aubrey, what's your favorite tree?
Oh. I got so
We're finally
excited.
pulling out the big guns. This is
Yeah.
the type of stuff I've been waiting for.
Yeah. I really love hemlock trees. They have the most beautiful little like pine cone, like they're just little cones. I see, I'll start waxing poetic, but they're really beautiful. And the way, if you can find a collection of hemlock trees to go and stand over in winter on like a sunny day, they have this way of like lacing the light. This is me saying tree canopy.
No, I get it.
But that to me, this is hemlock.
I was really appreciating it.
Yeah, so that definitely is a favorite. I also love sugar maples. We have a sugar maple on the land here, and bur oaks are another favorite. But hemlocks, if I had to, see, an hour from now, I'm gonna remember a bunch of other ones, but I'll stick with hemlock.
Oh wait, I almost missed a question from Didi. I don't want to miss this one because this is a good one. Are you able to share about your next projects, your next muse, your next heart work?
Thank you, Didi. Didi is part of my heart. So yeah, I'm glad that she's here. She always asks good questions. So I can share a little that I am shifting to prose for the next one. I don't know yet if it's an essay collection or if it's a memoir in essays or if it's just a full-on memoir. Memoir scares me as someone who's very nonlinear because I don't, I like fragments. I like moving in circles. So I'm leaning, it's probably going to be a like memoir and essay sort of thing. But it does touch a little bit on some of the things that showed up in this book. The restlessness aspect, neurodivergence. And I'm really curious about the ways that those intersect with kind of different traditions and practices. So especially in my ancestry, the very restless people that I think I got my ADHD from also have very intense beliefs and practices, and like a full line of ministers and missionaries who had no problem telling other people what to believe. So I think my hunch is there's some connection between all of those. And yeah, I'm just really interested in what that means and sort of like how it shows up even now in me, as kind of an inheritance. So the idea of inheritance keeps sticking with me for sure. So
So
yeah.
you're telling me you're going to submit something to the Game Over Books prose reading period that's starting tomorrow, huh, Emily?
Oh no, I'm
Second
not
book?
ready. Oh man, no. I wish I felt more ready. There's one essay that was just published in Belt magazine that comes from kind of the new body of work if folks are curious to check that out. But it took me 10 years to write this book. I'm hoping it's not quite as long for the next one, but yeah.
No, you take your time. You do what
Yeah.
you gotta do. You know what
Non-linearness
you
is very spacious. Yeah. So
absolutely. Well, no, thank you so much, Emily.
yeah,
Incredible
MJ.
reading.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and answering our questions tonight. I'm sure most of you folks here have snagged a copy of this book already or are putting your orders in right now. I am going to drop a link in the chat to this wonderful book here. Seriously, this is such a phenomenal collection, and we're so honored to be a part of its journey, and seeing it out in the world is amazing. So I hope you are proud of it, because it's a wonderful book.
Thanks,
And I'm
MJ.
excited for more people to get their hands on it. And with that being said, that is our show, everybody. Just thank you all. This was such a wonderful audience. It's great to just see everybody here and given the love tonight. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, listening to some poetry and giving us your time. Appreciate it. So yeah, throw some love in the chat before you go.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I'm seeing all the comments. Oh, so good to see everyone. Thank you so much. Oh.
And I'm gonna stop recording.